So, hello everyone again. Let's head into this panel session with our distinguished talkers. So, Paulo Soeiro from Visabeira, Joaquim Ferreira from IT Aveiro, João Silva from Capgemini, and another João Silva from Vortex. Also, Paul Marx from Albi Smart, and Lucas Kulas from the Gdansk University of Technology. So, a last minute change to the program. So I'll make this quick. I'll make two questions. I'll try to capture all of you, and then I'll open the floor for questions from the audience. So the first question I would have is about infrastructure and infrastructure that is needed to have to support vehicular services, right? So we've seen a couple of presentations about describing already deployed test beds in real conditions. And so, but I would, before talking to Joaquim and Paul Marx, which were the ones that presented that, I would also address Paulo Soeiro and ask him is Visabeira, being such a large group, you do communications, you do construction. Have you ever considered looking into this, the merging of these two domains and actually considering the construction supported by technology. So, for example, highways or some other context. And I would also ask Joaquin to give us a little bit of feedback on his experience of managing a large scale test bed for vehicular communications, right? Also, Paul Marx would be probably also willing to pitch in a little bit on that. And but more directly for Paul Marx, I would go into another key aspect of Floyd, which was the private 5G network. So the idea that as the 5G equipment becomes more softwareized and the equipment itself becomes easier to install, 5G networks become possibly a solution for providing connectivity over an entire private premise, whether it's an industrial facility, a port, a hardware. So I would ask Paul Marx, what does he think is missing before private 5G becomes a viable and attractive proposition for industrial customers? So that would be it. So I would give the word to Paul Swire and let him know his thoughts on whether Isabel has considered this merging of the construction and telecommunication side. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, we are since 2012 speaking with large road operators in Portugal. On our perspective, you do need a very dense 5G network in order to make all of these technologies work. And we've been working on horizontal directional drilling. So a technique that allows for very quick deployment of fiber just besides on the service corridor besides the highways. And we've been, evangelizing the people that are on these large operators that they do need a very dense 5G network. There have been, very polemical questions like, what is the type of revenue that they will get for being used, because it will be a shared infrastructure. All of the operators will be able to use that infrastructure. And there is a very large field of debate if they will have their own infrastructure and then they'll do infrastructure sharing or network sharing with the operators, or if they'll define other types of sharing with them. The financial model or the economical model has been at the forefront of the debate since 2012. But yes, we have been, catalyzing that discussion heavily because we are an infrastructure developer. And on our perspective, there are now some new techniques like HDD that can help very quick deployment of very dense 5G networks in the road infrastructures. I don't know if I.
No, perfect. I liked your answer very much. Nice to see that you're considering it. I would ask then Joaquin to give us his thoughts on building and managing such an infrastructure and how this relates to Paulo's answer, please.
For us, is I would say a nightmare. because it's not our core business to deploy large-scale infrastructure and manage them, making them operational over the years. So we have this issue of putting communication devices, not 5G, ITSC5 some years ago in a 25 motorway. Ascendi gave us access to their optical fiber, and then in the near future they will give us access to the pipes so we can put our own fiber. The pipes are already there, so there's no big issues on that. The biggest issue I would say is the electricity. To have electricity where we want to have it. So we are constrained in the first deployment by the points where we have both electricity and optical fiber. But now we have some budget to extend and to pass fiber, the new fiber, and we are working with Ascendi, with EMT and IP, so because in the normal business model in motorways, they don't own the infrastructure, they operate it, and the owners is Infraestruturas Portugal. So they must we must ask them if we can use the infrastructure. But for now, they are very open to it. So it's a very challenging task for a research institute to manage this because it's not our core business. But I think it's very important, not just for us, for research, but to open this infrastructure to companies to test their products and services. So that as this service it's very important, I guess, and to have an important cluster of companies, both national and international, to use this the infrastructure to deploy their products and to validate them.
Thank you so much. So now I would invite Paulo Marques to give us his thoughts on what is missing before private 5G networks are become a more common reality. Paulo, are you there?
So yeah, I'm here. So starting by the 5G private networks, or I think the advantages of using 5G in the industrial environments instead of the typical Wi-Fi are clear, because the low latency, the support of robotic communications, augmented reality also has important requirements in low latency. Yeah, but the issue I think is mainly related with the cost. So the cost has to goes down and should be comparable with Wi-Fi deployments. And in Portugal, we also have another challenge, that is the lack of spectrum for private 5G networks. So only the main mobile network operators will have the possibility to deploy this kind of networks, which limits opportunities for small companies. Other countries, they follow different approaches. The regulator in Germany, for instance, reserved 20 megahertz, which is quite good. So I think could be enough for most of the applications. And these 20 megahertz are available for the deployment of local 5G networks, so where interference is controlled. So I would say price and spectrum are very, very related. So I don't know if I have time, I can also comment on the deployments of test networks.
Sure.
What we did here in A23, of course, needs close, as Joaquin also mentioned, so it's very challenged to have this kind of infrastructure. We were very lucky because we have cooperation with Global Via, so we need the road operator with you, actively supporting you. So it was the case of the 5G Auto project. So we are Global Via A23 allows the deployment of now, I think, 15 roadside units across the highway. So this is critical. But I think also the future of these CITS technologies is not going to be short range roadside units based. So we should expect that the 5G deployment that will be mandatory by 2025 in Portugal, Anacom says that 95% coverage in highways. So it should be the 5G technology that will support these new services. I would say that ITSG5 technology, this kind is just the first step towards a densification of 5G that will support the more advanced services on CITS. And I think
Thank
it's
you.
all. Yeah, okay, thank
Sorry.
you.
Okay, do you want to say something else?
No,
No?
nothing
Okay,
else.
thank you. Well, if we had more time, I would ask Joaquim Ferreira what he thinks of the just purely 5G solution that was just mentioned, but
Depend on what, if you're talking to Volkswagen, probably they don't share
yes.
this idea. But it's I would say the future is the hybrid communications, different technologies. So we have some devices already with the three technologies inside, ITSG5, CV2X, and 5G on the same device. Not on the same module, I would say. But we were in contact with a major manufacturer some months ago, and they were telling us that the automotive market is not an issue on the connected side because every vehicle that will come in the next 3-4 years will come with some sort of communications. So either 5G or CV2X, ITSG5, depending on the particular manufacturer. So that's an open issue, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a question from the audience, so I think we could move on.
Pedro asked before is whether in the audience you have seen any proof, practical proof that 5G can deliver the low latencies, application layer, end-to-end low latencies that they are promising to as a competitor to ITSG5.
Do you want to address that to anyone?
Just anybody, well, the people were talking about, I would say to everybody, because everybody was being, probably not Paulo Sueiro, because he was not talking specifically about V2X project, but I think everybody else was talking about V2X projects. And so have you seen proof in your project or in other projects or in the scientific community that cellular 5G, 6G, I don't mind whichever G can deliver the low latencies that, I mean, application layer end-to-end that they are promising?
Sorry, depending on what the 5G are you talking about. Usually I would divide the V2X communications into families. Localized communications, we have ITSG5 and CV2X, so we have low latency there. If you're talking about networked communication that goes through to the core of the network, so you will have average, I would say, 50 milliseconds. I don't see results much below that. So I would say for very low latency, I think for the next few years, we have to rely on localized communications, either ITSG5 or CV2X.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to add to Joaquim's answer? No? Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll move forward. Do you want to reply or okay, perfect. In the interest of time, I move forward to the second question, and this will be directed to Lucas and João. We've seen that 5G and edge computing have been a key aspect of Floyd, and in Floyd's use case, and I think they probably show up a lot in insects use cases, which are a lot, and so Lucas probably knows many of them. And so I would first direct part of my question to Lucas. From all the use cases that you find in Insect, which ones do you think can still or will be transferred to the 5G challenge, right? So use cases that 5G hasn't fully addressed and that probably will be transported to the 6G aspect, and or which new use cases do you think may show up in future as we travel the road towards 6G? And my second part of the question would go to João Silva from Capgemini. It's about the edge computing. So I still struggle a little bit how is going to be how the edge services are going to be monetized. And I would like to know what's your view in terms of our companies going to monetize edge services. I mean, there are so many parties involved. There's telecom operators, there's edge computation operators, whatever that is. So I'm curious, how can companies really monetize from edge node services? And the last question for João Silva from Vortex is really, we see a lot of verification and validation applied to individual components or to point-to-point situations like the communication aspects you were mentioning. But as we move forward to this very decentralized future where you will have edge nodes everywhere, pervasive communication devices everywhere, how do you think that VNV can handle with all that decentralization and all that heterogeneity of devices and links, right? Can we really validate the functionalities we want in that such heterogeneous future? So I would give the word first to Lucas, hear his thoughts on what use cases as 5G not fully addressed and probably will still be around for the 6G development, or what new use cases does this team think that may be relevant or show up in the meantime, given that Insect has so many use cases, probably you'll have one idea or two about this. And so please, Lucas, if you would be so kind, I'll give the word to you.
Thank you for this question. Actually, it's a very interesting question because in Insect we are covering automotive use cases, but this is the topic you know and the auditory knows quite well. But I think that something really interesting it's to address the places where when the money can flow, I would say easily, because you will save time and reduce risks. And I'm talking about ports and harbors and logistics. This is in Insect we developed a very big use case that is addressing reducing time of operations in ports, in future smart ports, because in ports you've got usually quite big areas that are not homogeneous in terms of ownerships or operations. So it means that you have many different companies that are renting the space from the port authority. You have a few modes of transport. So you have not only cars, but you have rail and also floating units. You will have in close future also robots, either for logistic purposes, either for inspection purposes. And in ports, I'm not sure if you are aware, the port environment is really difficult in terms of propagation. So even if you use advanced 4G systems, there is spots where you cannot find communication due to a lot of metal, lot of changes in environment. So I think this area is particularly interesting in terms of revenues, because in ports, and every minute saved, it transfers immediately into revenues, into increased revenues for ports, because then they can serve more different more ships, and they can unload them faster. And also ports are very during these days, especially they suffer from different cyber attacks on physical layers. So it means jamming attacks can happen, and are happening. So in this respect, 5G and future 6G systems, I believe, could be very handy and provide profits for both operators and providers of different systems and for ports as well. So this is a field that might be interesting for the people involved in 5G development.
Okay, thank you. I see that the port environment is very challenging, so communication challenges there are definitely not over or not fully resolved, I guess, from your words. Thank you. Thank you for your input. So I will now pass the word to João to tell us how can we monetize edge services.
Okay. Thank you, Pedro. I think, in fact, it's a very interesting question when we are working for edge cloud computing and 5G core to start thinking how it can be monetized and sold. So I believe there are many key factors to be able to achieve that. One of those can be, for example, I believe, marketing and advertisement. I think it's very important to the service providers to be able to explain in a very direct and concise way to the customers why edge cloud computing is important, how it can be an improvement to their businesses, what it can add, let's say. So I will say that as a first topic. After that, I believe also it's important to have some guarantees in terms of performance. So, for example, for the service providers to establish some service level agreements that can guarantee some metrics and values for latency, reliability, availability as well. So it's very important for edge cloud computing concept. Also to have a strong investment, for example, in terms of security and privacy of the data that it's used. Also to gain the confidence of the customers in that point, to attract new customers and to keep the customers that they already have. Also, maybe in terms of price models, let's say, to establish some fair price models that can adapt and fit the customer requirements in this case. And also, I'm saying maybe as a last one, but because I believe there are many factors and key factors for this, but maybe to build a very strong infrastructure that it's able to provide all the requirements for edge cloud computing, for example, for autonomous driving that we mentioned today, to have the values for low latency, reliability that are required, which are very demanding. So I believe that these are some factors that are necessary to achieve and to be able to monetize.
Let me just ask you a very quick follow-up question before handing over to João Silva from Vortex. But who do you think will be providing edge computing services? Will be the telecom operators? Will be some different sort of operators? What's your take on that?
Well, in my opinion, yes, I believe it can be telecom operators. It's not defined area yet, but probably it can be one of the steps for that. Yes, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And so now finally to João Silva. So how can we ensure V2V, VNV? Sorry, this was a slip on my tongue. Verification and validation in a context which is even more decentralized, multi-brand, edge nodes, which we don't fully control. How can we provide guarantees of anything in such a decentralized environment?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, it's a tricky one, obviously, because I think the way to go, I think in the end we will almost inevitably have at least a few trends, a few different ones. And if we think specifically in the autonomous driving part, we need to validate if the car, the autonomous drivers are fulfilling, complying with the traffic rules, and we already nowadays have 2 or 3 different sets of traffic rules. So fortunately, not that many, but we have at least right-handed driving, left-handed driving, a few differences in the signal types, but there is at least a a semi-standard, if we may call it that way, because many things are common. At least for instance, if we think about traffic lights, it's common everywhere. I don't think there is any country that doesn't use red for stopping and green for going, for instance. So I think in the end, standardization will be the key to allow us to do any of this. So we are on the way, and it's a pity that Pedro is not here anymore. On the ITS, he presented a good catch on the current steps, the efforts that are being done both in Europe, and he told us about the three main issues, the three main points where this is happening in main geographies. So I think in the end we will have to rely on that we will reach a consensus, or at least two or three different consensus that can narrow down all the methodologies, all the techniques that we will apply in order to be able to actively perform the verification and validation of all of it with little adaptation to these few standards. So hopefully ETSI seems to be on a very good way to that point. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you, Francisco, should we open the floor for questions from the audience, or should move forward? One question from the audience, or is there any question from the audience to any of the panelists?
Locally or online?
Yeah, or online. I think there's. That's a good one. No, but let's perhaps give to Paulo. I think Paulo.
It's just a very provocative thing about monetization. So monetization will require, let's think that users of these systems are new users that are not people, are machines, that it will have to be a very pervasive infrastructure. It will have to cover the complete road infrastructure. So I think monetization will go towards a model of having a new operator for 5G corridors on highways that will have his own model of monetization, just like today we have Vodafone and Altice and so on. So I think there will be an upcoming operator for this type of special mobile.
That's a very interesting view.
I have a provocation for your provocation. It's related with the road operators. So you have the telecom operators that, okay, you have the telecom operators, and you have the road operator that can have sensors, specialized sensors to extend the field of view of the automated vehicles. So we have, and then want to monetize these sensors as well. So we have two operators that want to monetize.
We have one question also from Anna and Joan. But maybe maybe Anna's is a follow-up to this one.
I think I can just ease up, but what I wanted to ask is, what do you think if it will be possible to have autonomous driving? Okay, because we are talking about using 5G to complement autonomous driving and to aid autonomous driving. Okay, but then we have all these constraints and also regulation. Do you believe that we are close to having autonomous driving in Europe, especially in Portugal? And yeah, I would focus mostly on 5G because currently only operators are able to make use of the spectrum. And even for R&D purposes, it is a little bit difficult to get some small band for a project. So it is to be in an area that is to be requested before. So I will only want to ask you about this. Yeah.
Are you directing the question to anyone, or?
I think it's open.
Okay.
I think that most, or probably Joaquin, Paulo, and I'm Paulo also. Okay. Yeah. I might be able to answer.
So succinctly, are we close to having autonomous driving, and whether 5G is there to support it? Is Okay. Yeah, sure, because of the standardization issues. So anyone wants to reply to that?
So the reality is autonomous driving is inevitable and unavoidable. It will happen. It is, as you know, for instance, Teslas don't work with this type of system. So in their case, 5G will be an add-on system or aiding system to their own system. They have the Optimus system that is a large neural network that works in a centralized way and there's like an applet in each car. Okay, and they get updates all the time. So they are not yet close to level 5, but of course they will get to level 5. The issue now with standardization, so we'll have autonomous driving that is machine-based, not human-based anymore. And then you have 5G add-ons, right? Now, the problem is at a certain point, lawyers and regulation will come in and the big questions will come when an accident happens, who is responsible for damage? Yeah. So that will cause a lot of entropy that will ultimately, like, always humans do, will find a way in which we'll have someone with kind of a proof of authority that will come in and solve the issue in formal terms. But yes, level 5 will come, and this is only.
I would say that the answer depends on the person you ask to. If you ask to a software engineer, they will reply, okay, in 2 years we have automated driving. If you ask to a safety system person used to deploy airplanes and trains, okay, 20 years. But to be somewhere in the middle. And you also have the different perspective. In the United States, the burden is on the company side that have to prove that their system is safe and their responsibility. The regulation is somehow a bit more loose than in Europe, where there are very strict regulations. And I would say Europe has the risk to become lagging on this technology because of regulation. Okay, but the regulation and the lawyer's issue, as long as you have some insurance company that accepts the risk and they certifies and the risk is shared, so it's okay. But I would say, if I have to put now, you also have two levels. You have the automated driving, where the vehicle only relies on their internal sensors, and that will come. It's operating in the United States already for some years, I would say. But when you're talking about cooperation, that's another business. So cooperation, we have to trust another guy, sensors from other manufacturer, probably sensors from the road, and that's a different game. So that would take much longer because I think automotive manufacturers, they don't even want to hear about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's time to thank our panelists. So a big applause to them.